SUNIL GENESS is currently Director of Global Government Affairs and CSR Africa at SAP. He commenced his career as a physical science, mathematics and electronics teacher before moving on to develop a wide range of experience in government, quasi-government and private sector organizations. These roles have included a policy-making and implementation stint at the South African national government, various programs in South African provinces, a national government modernization role, and subsequently a political advisory role at the State Information Technology Agency, SITA. GENESS holds a Bachelor of Commerce, UNISA, Bachelor of Commerce Honors, Cum Laude, UNISA, Master of Management, Witwatersrand, HED, Springfield College. He is also a director at the Hasselplattner The School Africa, Chairperson KwaZulu-Natal Science Center. He is a member of the United Nations Experts Group on the Global E-Government Survey, member of the World Economic Forum, WEF. Ladies and gentlemen, make welcome to GPAD, SUNIL GENESS.
It's a real honor to join you today, and I must apologize. My intention was to be there in person, but circumstances didn't allow. It's a real pleasure to join you from Johannesburg today in South Africa. Now, I had the opportunity of listening to the promotional video, and I couldn't be filled with more pride when I listened to that. And as an African, and looking at all of the developments that have taken place in recent times, one cannot help but imagine the future, which is one that is rich for Africans, particularly since our former speaker, Ms. Leonie Brandl, touched on Africa's geographical position and the kind of infrastructure that's developed. I thought we should also add a very important component to this, which is that Africa has the largest percentage of young people. And it's no doubt in terms of technology that young people adopt technology in a much faster fashion. They are braver in adopting technology. And it is therefore incumbent upon us as organizations like SAP, which is a household name in Germany. As you would know, SAP was founded some 50 years ago by 5 entrepreneurs. It was a startup, and in fact turned 50 in April this year. SAP has been in Africa for the last 30 odd years, and has been doing a number of positive things on the continent to benefit society, community, governments in particular, and then of course the various industries that we find ourselves in. Now, when one looks at technology as a development mechanism for the continent, I mean, the COVID pandemic was very, very, very poignant in demonstrating that the use of technology to overcome such difficulties which people found in the past literally forced many organizations in the private sector, in the government arena, in the quasi-government arena, and in the social enterprise space to take a quantum leap into what many would call the fourth industrial revolution. But at the heart of all of this is Africa's people. The continent is filled with a diversity of individuals who speak different languages. We are blessed with Arabic in the north. We have Francophone in some parts of the continent, in the central parts of the continent. And we also have English speaking and obviously Portuguese speaking, with one country speaking Spanish. So there's a richness in terms of knowledge, in terms of languages, which enables Africa to become a springboard for the future. Now, if we look at the entire development trajectory of Africa, one of the most significant things that has happened is the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And therein lies a massive opportunity for Africa to trade within the continent per se, to trade across borders, to introduce legislation and reduce red tape so that greater trade can take place in Africa. And that trade is not limited to the physical trade that we are normally quite used to on the continent. We are talking about digital transactions which can take place. And underlying all of this is the issue of data. And I wouldn't say issue really, I would say the topic of data. And critically for Africa, it's important that as Africans that we are able to create frameworks, which I should say allows for data residency on the continent, allows for increased data privacy to be embedded in the way that we engage, and more particularly the way that we transact. And of course, one cannot forget that legislation that accompanies that, particularly in the privacy arena, is becoming increasingly important. In the southernmost tip of Africa, we know that in South Africa, the POPIA Act has been promulgated. And being in Germany, you'll know privacy is a major point of contention. And more across the globe, we are seeing the rise of privacy and the need for organizations, both in the private and the public sector, to protect data and handle and manage data in a way that is responsible. And it's incumbent upon us. Now, in terms of the kind of work that we are doing on the continent, I would like to touch on, I'm aware of the time frame as well. I'd like to touch on a few programs, and I'd like to make reference to the UN SDGs. And taking Africa into account, one cannot help stop yourself from thinking about three important SDGs. The first one is SD or Goal 12. Goal 12 is about partnerships. The second of this trifecta that I'd like to talk about today is quality education, which is goal number 4. And last but not least, I'm totally unashamed to say this, that women on our continent remain the bedrock of much of what happens here. From engaging in community, raising children, being part of the agrarian community and society, and being very much part of the economic structures. So with those three sort of goals in mind, I'd just like to touch on 2 programs that SAP is driving in Africa. I have some slides which I will send to Timmy and the team, but in lieu of time, I'm just going to talk about these. The first program is the Africa Code Week program. And this program we initiated in Africa in 2015. And today we are very proud to say that it is arguably the largest digital literacy program in the world. And part and parcel of that, it touches these 3 very important SDG goals because we focus on women and girls in that program. We focus on creating what we would call an egalitarian society. We focus on education. And last but not least, we focus on the power of partnerships. And our partners have included governments across Africa. Our partners have included the likes of Irish Aid, the United Nations, and several other organizations which have a Pan-African role to play. And critically in this process, since the inception of 2015, we teach children how to code and computational skills using freely and readily available MIT Scratch coding. And through processes that we've initiated with partners, we've been able to impact more than 12 million lives. And in that process, hundreds of thousands of teachers have benefited because they are what remains behind as these young children and young adults move to this program. And more than 50% of the participants in the program, which is Africa Code Week program, are girls. We also engaged to put in a women empowerment program to ensure that the women of Africa are not left behind, being such an integral cog and part of our successes in the past. Now, as we moved on during the COVID pandemic, prior to that, we were delivering these programs in person, but we had to adapt. And it forced us to look at virtual ways of delivering this Africa Code Week program, including the establishment of an application which can be accessed from multiple devices and platforms, and putting in place what we call the African Code Challenge, where children across Africa can participate in groups and learn about computational skills, learn about how to code in sequence and how to code in parallel, learn about computational skills and the fundamentals of computational skills. We are mindful that all the young children that we put through these programs won't necessarily become the next coders at SAP or any other IT company on the continent or in the world. However, the idea behind all of this is that Africans, with the richness of youth that we have, the intellect, the creativity, the pizzazz that is demonstrated. You would have seen that at the World Cup yesterday when Senegal was playing, and you look at the crowds and you feel the vibrancy of Africa, and it makes us proud when we see that. With all of that, it's important that Africans become creators and are not just consumers of technology on the continent. And herein, through a program like Africa Code Week, we're able to engender and empower young Africans to take their lives, their digital lives, into their own hands. But they are also capable, because of the internet and other technologies, to be able to participate in the global economy whilst they remain in their countries. One of the things that really saddens me is from time to time is to see the movement of people from the northernmost part of Africa trying to reach Europe. And if those opportunities that we are creating remain relevant for people, we would prevent a number of people losing their lives, families being intact, and many more things which are the fabric of society. And this can all be built with the aid and the utilization of technology. Last but not least, platforms such as GPAD form a very, very important fulcrum for not only Africans, but Europeans and the world to demonstrate how we can partner together to make a better Africa and a prosperous Africa. And as the United Nations, and more particularly the African Union, talks about Vision 2063, that vision will only be realized if the public sector, the private sector, communities, social enterprises, and the youth, who are the most important aspect of what we're going to try to achieve in the future, combine to provide the necessary impetus to take us forward. Thank you very much. I see I have 10 minutes more, so I can continue a bit further. Thank you very much for that, Timmy. Now, I wanted to touch on two other aspects, given the time that is available. Another sort of growing and increasingly growing interest amongst young people, but particularly people who live on the continent in all walks and all industries, is artificial intelligence. We are seeing across Africa, in countries like South Africa, for example, where mining has been a key lever in terms of the economy, in terms of products and particularly elements, or what you would call in the global markets commodities, being in the boom phase. But however, lots of lives are lost in the process. Many of these lives are not reported. There are many cases where miners injure themselves. And the use of technology on the African continent is growing. We know that in the mining industry in South Africa, that these companies, who I must say have done very well since the inception of mining in this country, are looking increasingly to the use of artificial intelligence to not only protect miners, but to undertake mining in a much more sustainable fashion. And that word sustainable, haven't we been bashed to death with that word in the last sort of 2 weeks, with Africa hosting COP27? Now, another key aspect, and lots of people talk about this just transition to sustainable energy. And many people think is this about reducing a carbon footprint only? Is this about the behavior of citizens in Africa? Is this about industries and the way that they behave? Is this about being a good corporate citizen? Is this about oil and gas companies being totally responsible for the kind of environmental challenges they produce? And I would say all of the above. We know as Africans that the COP27 dragged for many, many days until there was a quasi sort of solution which had come up around the availability of funding and a fund being set up for Africans. And I must say the following, that in speaking to global leaders in Africa, I won't mention them by name because I don't have their permission, but in speaking to some of our customers, some of the richest people on this planet who have an empire of organizations, I talk to them about sustainability and technology. And they say to me, sustainability has a perspective. The perspective of Africa's around sustainability differs from the West and from the industrialized countries. However, my retort to that is, irrespective of the different perspectives, technology can form a vital component of addressing and managing what many are talking about, the minimization to 1.5 degrees of increase in temperature. And at SAP, we've worked for many years on creating what we call our sustainability stack. And it helps companies to essentially record data and to be much more aware of the carbon that's being put into the atmosphere, but more particularly their processes, their people, their services that they produce, and the products that they produce. And we're seeing in terms of technology that there is definitely an upswing in the consumption of technology to manage what many are terming, and I'm repeating this, the just transition of energy from, for example, coal-fired power stations in Africa to sustainable energies. So I thought I should touch on that as a second topic of importance. I know that the German government has been very actively involved in this process in South Africa, and many companies, many German companies are looking at possibilities of supporting this transition in South Africa, and it'll grow in other countries across the African continent. Then I thought in terms of technology, we should also pause and reflect on some very basic things. In Africa, some of the challenges that I experience is that the cost of bandwidth, or loosely translated, access to technology, access to the internet, is very, very high. There's no doubt about that. When you compare that to rates that you would have in Asia, for example, we're very expensive. And I think it's incumbent upon the major telco companies and even governments across Africa to literally democratize access to the internet, or bring bandwidth to all communities. The ones that are in the higher sort of earning capacity should pay for it, no doubt. But just like you have services like water and electricity, which should be delivered, there should be access to the internet and a vibrant bandwidth that is put in place. And we're finding in Africa that we were late to the party, that we had the easy cable come to us, that there have been, in some cases, nationalization of the ability to deliver on some of these technology capacity. But in other cases, we also note that there are private sector companies, cell phone telephony companies, who in some cases could do better, much better in reducing the cost. We've also recently seen, as an exemplar in South Africa, that a bunch of private sector investors have got together and they're bringing low-cost internet to households, and in particular, some of the most rural areas of South Africa. And if Africa wants to truly take advantage of the future, Africans must have access to the internet, and continuously so, and to be able to collaborate and develop. Of course, that also assists many companies to do business. Of course, the dot-com rise bubble in the United States, and then the dropping off of the dot-com industry. The commercial industry, e-commerce, could thrive in countries as we've seen in the United States, I mean, this whole Black Friday concept that is out there, just to give you an idea, in Asia, in China, Alibaba runs something which is called Singles Day Purchase. And I recently read a statistic which said the amount that is consumed on that single day purchase is more than 90% of the Black Friday trade around the world. But that talks to the power of numbers. And let's bring that back to Africa. The power of numbers lies with Africans. It lies with the youth. It lies with enabling platforms like GPAD. It lies with partnership. It lies with collaboration and partnership. It lies more particularly with education. And last but not least, it lies with creating a gender neutral and egalitarian society. And with those words, I would like to thank very much the organizers for inviting me to speak to you today, for sharing some of my thoughts, which in some cases are controversial, as one would want to be from time to time, because we have different opinions and we look at things from a different lens, but it is meant for the benefit of Africa. We have got to call things out the way that they are for Africans and for the continent to move towards 2063. I thank you.